On the planet Valera, the sky always seemed vast and endless, stretching beyond imagination, and the people who lived there grew up hearing strange, haunting stories about creatures that were said to have lived long before them. These creatures were called humans, and they were supposed to have been powerful, clever, and dangerous. The stories told that humans could build incredible machines that flew through the sky, create weapons that could destroy entire cities, and travel to places that no one on Valera could even imagine. But according to the elders, these humans had disappeared thousands of years ago. Some said they destroyed themselves in a terrible war. Others whispered that they had left Valera to explore the stars, never to return. Most of the people of Valera considered these tales as nothing more than myths, warnings for children about the dangers of pride and ambition. To them, humans were legends, almost like fairy tales, meant to scare or teach lessons rather than being real. Among the people of Valera, there was one young archivist named Lyra. She spent her days in a giant library that looked over the city, filled with countless scrolls, books, and maps that had been preserved for centuries. Lyra was different from the others. While most people treated the human stories as old, boring myths, she was fascinated by them. She couldn't help but feel that there was some truth hidden in those tales. Every time she read a scroll or examined an old star map, her curiosity grew stronger. She noticed details in the ancient writings that no one else paid attention to, symbols etched into the maps, strange coordinates pointing to parts of the sky that seemed empty, and mentions of massive flying machines that didn't make sense for a species that supposedly vanished one day. While sifting through dusty scrolls tucked away in a forgotten corner of the library, Lyra stumbled upon a star map that was unlike any she had seen before. The lines on it didn't just point to stars or planets, they seemed to form a route, a path that stretched across the sky in a way that suggested travel, not just observation. There were markings that hinted at advanced technology, symbols that she had never seen in any other record. Lyra's heart raced. Could it be possible that humans had really existed and had actually traveled through these stars? The more she examined it, the more convinced she became that the legends were based on some truth. She started comparing the map with old records of energy bursts and strange lights reported centuries ago, and she noticed small matches, coincidences that made her wonder if someone had been trying to leave a trail for future generations to follow. While Lyra was busy uncovering these secrets, life on Valera continued as normal for most people. Cities thrived under enormous crystal towers that glowed softly in the evening light. People went about their daily lives, trading goods, teaching children, and celebrating festivals that honored the history of their planet. But despite the beauty of their lives, there was always a quiet fear that ran through society, a fear of the unknown, of forces beyond their understanding. The stories of humans were whispered in this context, often told to children to remind them that curiosity could be dangerous. Yet Lyra's curiosity felt different. It was not reckless or wild, it was determined, patient, and growing stronger every day. She wanted to know the truth, even if it was frightening. As she dug deeper, Lyra found more fragments of ancient communications, faint signals that had been ignored or dismissed by the authorities. The older records hinted at a time when humans had traveled from one planet to another, establishing colonies, sometimes helping, sometimes dominating. The traces left behind were almost like footprints across the galaxy, but for centuries they had been considered too faint, too uncertain to be real. Lyra, however, saw patterns where others saw only dust and noise. Every piece of information she collected formed a puzzle that seemed to suggest that the humans were not just myths, they had been real, and their technology had been powerful enough to leave long-lasting impressions on the universe. She imagined what it must have been like to see them in their full glory. Massive ships cutting through the sky, engines glowing with energy, commanders giving orders that could move entire planets. The more she thought about it, the more alive the stories became in her mind. Her obsession with these ancient legends began to affect her daily life. She spent hours alone in the library, following the star routes, tracing symbols, and trying to decode messages that no one else could understand. People started to notice that Lyra spoke of humans as if they were real beings who might return someday, and some laughed or dismissed her, but she didn't care. She was driven by a feeling she couldn't explain, a sense that the universe was bigger than the myths told by her people, and that the stories she had heard were a warning, a guide, and a promise all at once. Every night, when she looked up at the dark sky filled with stars, she felt a strange pull, as if the humans themselves were calling out to be remembered. She couldn't know what awaited, but she felt certain that her discovery was just the beginning of something much larger than her own life, something that would change how everyone on Valera thought about their past and their place in the universe. As the days passed on, Valera, the sky, which had always seemed peaceful and calm, began to show strange signs that nobody could explain. Lyra had been following the patterns in the old star maps and transmissions she discovered, and she noticed unusual energy readings in the upper atmosphere. At first, they were small, a flicker here, a burst of light there, something that most people would have ignored. But Lyra saw a pattern, and it made her heart race. She began tracking these anomalies carefully, marking their locations on new charts, comparing them with the ancient maps. They seemed to move, slowly but steadily, and their arrangement was unlike anything natural. It reminded her of the old legends she had studied, the tales of the humans and their sky machines that could traverse space with incredible speed. She could not stop thinking about what it meant. Most of the people on Valera, however, noticed nothing unusual or, if they did, dismissed it as normal cosmic activity. The Planetary Council, which oversaw science and exploration, labeled the readings as atmospheric disturbances caused by storms or solar winds. Reports came from astronomers and pilots, but their voices were cautious. Some described metallic glints reflecting in the clouds, fleeting flashes of shapes that moved in coordinated patterns. But these reports were brushed aside as optical illusions or errors in instruments. Even so, rumors began to spread among ordinary people. Farmers, traders, and city dwellers started sharing stories of strange lights that hovered in the sky at night or disappeared as quickly as they appeared. Fear and curiosity mixed together. For many, these events were exciting but frightening, because the sky had always been a symbol of safety and stability. Now, it seemed unpredictable, almost alive. Lyra, of course, was obsessed. She spent every available hour in her observation tower, scanning the horizon and the night sky with delicate instruments she had repaired herself. She noticed the anomalies were not random. They seemed to follow a pattern almost exactly like the routes drawn on the ancient star maps. She compared the positions of the flashes, the timings of the signals, and the angles at which the glints appeared. The results stunned her. It was as if the humans, if they were real, were coming back along the same paths they had used centuries ago. Lyra could hardly believe what she was seeing. Each new observation strengthened her belief that the legends were more than stories. They were memories of real events that had left traces for someone to find. She knew, deep in her heart, that this might be the moment when the myths she had loved her whole life could become reality. Meanwhile, among the pilots and astronomers tasked with monitoring the skies, tension was rising. They had trained for space anomalies, but nothing in their history or records matched what they were witnessing. Squadrons were dispatched to investigate, but the signs always disappeared or shifted before they could reach them. The reports became more urgent, and the people in charge started arguing. Some believed it was a natural phenomenon and that panic was unnecessary, while others warned that they might be seeing something entirely unknown, something that could be dangerous. The debate grew heated, and rumors began to inflame public fear. Citizens began to gather in open fields at night, looking up, pointing, whispering to each other about lights and shadows moving across the sky. The once quiet nights of Valera were now filled with tension and awe, a feeling that something extraordinary was approaching. Lyra did not just watch the sky, she tried to communicate, using old techniques she had read about in the archives. She sent coded pulses into the energy bursts, hoping to see if they would respond. For a while, nothing happened. Then, subtly, the lights shifted in ways that seemed deliberate. They changed formation and speed, almost as if answering her signals. Her hands shook as she realized what might be happening. The humans, or whatever had created the legends, were noticing her. The thought was both terrifying and thrilling. She shared her findings with a small group of trusted colleagues, but many were skeptical or frightened. They could not believe what she was suggesting. Lyra felt increasingly isolated, but she also knew she had to keep observing. If the humans were really returning, she had to be ready for what came next. As the days went on, the anomalies became bolder. Flashes in the sky grew brighter, patterns more complex. They began to resemble enormous formations moving as if controlled by intelligence. People who had previously dismissed the old myths began to question everything. School teachers, storytellers, and historians revisited the ancient tales, now looking at them with new eyes. The legend of humans, once considered a mere fantasy, began to feel real to more and more people. Lyra could feel the tension building in the air. The city hummed with unease, people whispering about what might appear next. The excitement was palpable, but so was fear, because none of them knew whether the beings who once dominated the skies would be friendly, indifferent, or hostile. One night, as Lyra observed from the tower, the lights in the sky began to form a pattern unlike anything she had seen before. They were no longer flickers or glints. They moved together, like a giant formation, stretching across the horizon. She realized with a shock that the shape matched the descriptions in one of the oldest scrolls, a formation that ancient records had claimed could only be made by human sky machines. Her breath caught as the magnitude of what she was seeing sank in. This was no natural phenomenon. This was intelligence, design, and power. And for the first time in her life, Lyra understood that the stories of humans were not just warnings, they were memories of a species that had once ruled the stars and might be returning to claim their place once more. The entire planet seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next, as the night sky, filled with strange and moving lights, became more alive and dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The sky over Valera had changed completely. What had once been flickers and flashes now took shape, forming enormous machines that moved in perfect coordination, casting long shadows over cities and forests alike. Lyra watched from her observation tower, her eyes wide in disbelief. The shapes were unmistakable massive warships, built with technology beyond anything she had ever imagined. The legends she had studied so closely were coming to life before her. The ships hovered silently at first, then shifted in formation as if acknowledging each other, and finally, they began descending closer to the planet. People in the streets stared upward, mouths open, some frozen in fear while others ran for cover. The air buzzed with an energy that made the ground feel alive, and for the first time in centuries, the myth of humans was no longer just a story, it was a terrifying reality. Panic spread through the planetary council as reports poured in from across Valyria. Entire fleets of the planet's own spacecraft had been mobilized. But the human ships were unlike anything they had prepared for. They were enormous, sleek, and heavily armed, yet they moved with precision and grace. Lyra noticed that their hulls glimmered with strange symbols that she had seen in the ancient scrolls and maps she had been studying. Her heart raced as she realized that these markings were the same as those left behind by the humans thousands of years ago. It was as if the ships themselves were speaking in a language only she could understand. Confirming that the legends had been true all along, she tried to warn the council and the pilots, explaining the importance of the symbols, but most dismissed her as overly imaginative. Unable to see the connection she had spent years uncovering, the people of Valyria reacted in a mixture of awe and terror. Some fell to their knees, unable to believe what they were witnessing, while others argued and shouted, demanding action. Markets emptied as citizens fled to safer areas, homes were abandoned in haste, and the normally calm cities became chaotic. Soldiers and pilots prepared for battle, but their weapons seemed insignificant next to the massive presence of the human warships. Every command center buzzed with tension as leaders debated whether to attempt communication or prepare for a full-scale defense. The uncertainty was suffocating. Nobody knew whether the humans were hostile, friendly, or merely curious, and every moment that passed made the situation more dangerous. Then a single clear message came from the largest of the ships. It resonated across communication networks, bypassing security protocols and reaching every corner of Valyria. The message was simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. "We have returned." Its tone was neither threatening nor welcoming, but it carried authority, the kind of authority that could not be questioned. People froze, unsure how to respond. The military scrambled to decode whether this was an invitation, a warning, or a declaration of conquest. Lyra, however, felt a strange calm. The words confirmed what she had suspected. The humans were real, and they had come back to reclaim a place they considered theirs. She realized that Valyria's entire history might be about to change, and the planet itself could be caught in the crossfire between the present and a long-forgotten past, that is, the humans. Presence became undeniable. Lyra and a small group of scientists tried to piece together what these visitors wanted. By analyzing energy patterns emitted by the ships, Lyra discovered that they were scanning the planet's system. They seemed to be looking for something specific, something buried beneath the surface or hidden from plain sight. The energy readings suggested advanced technology far beyond anything Valyrians could create, capable of probing deep into the planet's crust. Lyra speculated that the humans were searching for resources, artifacts, or perhaps evidence of their own lost colonies. The realization sent shivers down her spine. Whatever the humans were after, it could mean disaster for those who lived on Valyria, or it could offer an unprecedented opportunity to learn from beings who had once ruled the stars. Communication attempts from the Valyrians were cautious. Messages sent to the humans were polite but firm, asking them to identify themselves and state their intentions. The responses, however, were cryptic, giving no clear answer beyond confirming their presence. Every attempt at negotiation revealed the enormous gap in technology and understanding. Lyra noticed subtle movements in the ship's shifts in formation, changes in energy patterns that suggested the humans were observing the Valyrians just as intently as they were being observed. There was intelligence in every motion, a deliberate strategy that left the planet's leaders anxious and unprepared. For the first time, Lyra understood that this was not an invasion in the traditional sense. It was something far more calculated, far more frightening. The humans were not simply arriving, they were assessing, judging, and planning. Among the people of Valyria, fear mingled with curiosity. Some scholars and historians began examining old texts with renewed urgency, searching for clues that might help understand these beings. Others fell into despair, convinced that their world could not survive a confrontation with such powerful visitors. Children stared at the sky with a mixture of wonder and terror, while families huddled together, whispering old legends that suddenly seemed more like warnings than stories. Lyra, watching from her tower, felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. The years she had spent studying the myths had prepared her in a way no one else could imagine. She understood that she might be the only person on Valyria able to interpret what the humans wanted and guide the planet through this unprecedented moment. As the hours turned into days, the largest of the human warships began to descend closer to the surface, hovering above the major cities. Its sheer size and presence dominated the skyline, casting shadows that made entire districts look small and fragile. Lyra could see intricate patterns of lights moving along the hull, almost as if the ship were alive, breathing, and observing the world beneath it. The ground shook faintly with the energy being emitted, and those nearby felt a sense of awe so strong that it was almost paralyzing. Lyra's excitement battled with her fear. She had dreamed of this moment for years, yet the reality of it was overwhelming. These were not myths, not stories, not warnings from the past. They were beings who had returned to demand attention, to challenge the present, and to remind the people of Valera of a history they had long forgotten. Amid the tension, Lyra continued to study the symbols and designs on the ships. She realized that the humans had left intentional traces for those who could read their messages and instructions embedded in the shapes, angles, and movements. It was a communication that required understanding history, culture, and intelligence combined, something she had spent her life preparing to decipher. As she focused on decoding these messages, she understood that the humans' arrival was not simply a display of power. It was also a test, a way to gauge whether the Valerans were capable of understanding, cooperating, or resisting. Every action by the humans carried meaning, and Lyra knew that interpreting them correctly could decide the fate of her entire planet. The world of Valera had shifted irreversibly. The sky, once a symbol of stability, had become a stage for beings of unimaginable power. The legends of humans were no longer stories told to children. They were a reality confronting every person on the planet. Lyra felt the thrill of discovery mixed with the terror of the unknown. The people of Valera could no longer pretend that their myths were mere fantasy. The humans had returned, their warships dominating the skies, and the planet would never be the same again. Every mind turned upward, every eye watched the enormous ships, and every heart beat with a mixture of fear, hope, and anticipation, as the true test of the planet's courage, intelligence, and survival had only just begun. As the enormous human warships hovered over Valera, the people of the planet began to understand that this was not a simple visit. Lyra, observing the ships closely, noticed that their movements were systematic, precise, and almost investigative. They were scanning the terrain, probing the soil and rock beneath the surface with beams of energy that could pierce deep into the planet. At first, the Council and the military assumed this was an exploration mission, but Lyra quickly realized that it was something far more serious. The humans were searching for something hidden, something ancient. She remembered old legends that hinted at buried technology, long-lost artifacts, and structures left behind by the original settlers. The humans' actions suggested that these were not myths. They were following a path that only someone familiar with the planet's history could recognize. Lyra felt a mixture of awe and fear. Knowing that the humans had knowledge and power far beyond anything Valerans could imagine, the Planetary Council struggled to make sense of the situation. Military leaders debated whether to confront the humans, attempt to negotiate, or retreat to safer territories. Weapons were ready, but nobody believed they could match the humans' firepower. Diplomats tried to send messages, but the humans responded with cryptic communications, neither openly hostile nor clearly friendly. The planet's inhabitants felt the tension rising with every passing hour. Entire cities paused their daily routines, workers abandoned their tasks, and families stayed indoors, fearful of what the humans might do. Lyra, however, was focused on understanding the visitors rather than fleeing. She studied the symbols on the warships, compared their formations with ancient texts, and tried to decode patterns in the energy signals. Each discovery brought a new revelation. The humans were not merely powerful, they were calculating, careful, and deeply connected to the planet's past. Through careful observation, Lyra uncovered a hidden truth buried in the legends. The original humans had once colonized Valera centuries ago, leaving behind advanced technology and structures that were carefully hidden to survive the passage of time. Over the years, the Valerans had evolved, their culture and appearance changing drastically from the original settlers. Most had no idea that their ancestors were linked to the humans at all. Lyra realized that the current humans viewed the planet as rightfully theirs, expecting to reclaim the resources, structures, and knowledge that had been left behind. This understanding changed everything. The situation was no longer a random encounter. It was a confrontation between descendants and ancestors, between those who had lived in secrecy for generations and those who had returned to reclaim their legacy. As the humans continued their survey of the planet, Lyra worked tirelessly to communicate what she had learned to the Council. She explained that the Valerans themselves might unknowingly possess remnants of human technology or knowledge, and that understanding this connection could provide a path to negotiation or defense. Some council members were skeptical, thinking that the idea of shared ancestry was far-fetched, while others saw the possibility as a strategic advantage. Tension between political leaders grew, with debates about whether to reveal the truth to the public or keep it secret. Lyra argued that understanding the humans' intentions and history was critical because ignorance could lead to disastrous decisions. The more she studied, the clearer it became that the humans' return was not an invasion for conquest alone, but also a test and assessment of the Valerans' ability to recognize their own history and intelligence. The human ships were enormous, casting vast shadows over cities, forests, and mountains. Their energy scans penetrated deep beneath the planet's crust, uncovering hidden structures and ancient tunnels. Lyra suspected that these were remnants of original human colonies, perhaps even laboratories or command centers that had been buried for safety. She realized that the humans were evaluating these sites, likely searching for technologies or knowledge that could only belong to their kind. The scans revealed faint energy traces that had been left by Valerian structures built upon the original settlements, indicating that the modern population had unknowingly built their cities atop human foundations. Lyra's mind raced as she imagined the implications. The planet's prosperity, culture, and history were all connected to a civilization that had supposedly vanished. The humans' presence forced the Valerians to confront a past they had never fully understood. Fear among the population intensified. Rumors spread that the humans intended to claim the planet, remove the people, or even punish them for interfering with resources that were considered sacred or proprietary. Children whispered in fear at school. Traders hurried to leave markets before the humans could arrive, and families debated whether to hide in underground bunkers or flee to remote regions. Despite the growing panic, some individuals, like Lyra, saw the moment as an opportunity. The humans' return might offer access to knowledge, technology, and history that had been lost for centuries. If understood and approached correctly, the encounter could transform the Valerians' understanding of their own abilities, their history, and their place in the galaxy. Lyra felt a heavy responsibility. She had spent her life studying myths that had now become reality, and she might be the key to bridging the gap between the humans and the Valerians. Communication attempts became critical. Lyra analyzed patterns in the human signals, looking for ways to respond in a meaningful way. The humans were sending messages not in words alone, but in sequences of energy pulses and light patterns, suggesting intelligence and intent beyond simple speech. Lyra began decoding these patterns, realizing that the humans were assessing the Valerians' capability to understand and respond. It became clear that the humans were testing the planet's inhabitants, evaluating whether they were capable of cooperation, adaptation, or resistance. Every misstep could provoke a negative reaction, while careful observation and understanding might allow peaceful interaction. Lyra worked day and night, comparing the signals to ancient records and star maps, searching for clues hidden for generations. As the analysis continued, Lyra discovered that some Valerians possessed latent knowledge, skills, and even remnants of technology that were similar to what the humans were seeking. These were not deliberate inventions but evolved adaptations over centuries, shaped unknowingly by the legacy of the original humans. The realization stunned her. The humans were not just surveying a random planet, they were encountering a species that had evolved from their own ancestors, descendants who had hidden or transformed human knowledge over countless generations. The potential for conflict or cooperation now depended on understanding this hidden connection. Lyra shared her findings with the Council, urging them to act carefully. She warned that the humans' actions were precise, deliberate, and intelligent. A wrong move could lead to catastrophic consequences, while understanding and clever negotiation could change the course of history. The Valerians faced a critical choice: fight against beings who possessed vastly superior technology, negotiate with those who saw them as part of a long-forgotten legacy, or flee to avoid immediate conflict. Each option carried enormous risks. Fighting would almost certainly lead to destruction. Negotiating required unprecedented understanding and courage, and fleeing could leave the planet in the hands of the humans, possibly altering the course of civilization. The Council remained divided, but Lyra's insights became a guiding force. She emphasized that knowledge, patience, and understanding of the past could become the planet's greatest defense. By decoding the humans' intentions and recognizing their shared history, Valera might find a path to survival and cooperation rather than destruction. As days passed, the humans' scanning and assessment continued, and tension reached a peak. Lyra continued her research, learning more about hidden structures, latent energy sources, and the ancestral connection between the humans and the Valerians. The realization grew stronger that the planet itself was a bridge between past and present, a living record of human legacy that the visitors had returned to uncover. The planet's fate now rested on understanding, communication, and the courage to confront truths long buried. Lyra understood that the events unfolding were far larger than any individual or council. They involved history, identity, and the future of an entire civilization. Valera was no longer just a planet. It was a stage where the past and present collided, and every decision could change the course of generations to come.